You're watching The Culture Cave, and you're watching the Nagasaki adventures with myself, Gabriella White, and Mr. Kinoshita, who is a UN peace volunteer and a very knowledgeable and famous guide here in Nagasaki. And we're actually just exploring the history going back to the 1500s, when all of this started, firstly with Portugal, right before the Dutch arrived. We'll talk first about 1543. Now that was an important year, wasn't it?
1543.
Yes, the Portuguese.
Oh yes.
So the Portuguese ship drifted ashore of
Tanegashima.
Yes.
The southern part of island, and first brought gun to Japan. Yeah. And that was 6 years later, 1549. Saint Francisco Xavier started to missionary work in Japan. So first gun arrived first, next Christianity.
That's very interesting, isn't it? Very, very symbolic.
Very.
Quite primitive, really. The kind of warrior side of things.
And even from those days, Japanese are very good for studying the machines, how they are designed, and imitate, and do mass production.
Yes.
So we made many guns,
Yes.
mass production.
Right.
Those who made most guns took the power. Yeah.
Which
The shogun is
the shogun.
Nobunaga Oda, and Hideyoshi Toyotomi, and finally Tokugawa.
Okay.
All they used the power of guns.
Yes. So that brings us to 1570. We have Sumitada Omura, the Christian Lord.
Yes, Christian Lord. The first Christian Lord opened Nagasaki in 1570.
1570.
And next year, 1571, first Portuguese ship arrived in Nagasaki.
The very first one.
The first one to Japan.
Now, why was he called the Christian Lord?
Christian Lord he was the first Christian who of samurai, so to speak. Yeah, he was the first one to become first samurai to become Christian.
Do we know why that happened? Was it his personal interest, or was he converted by the Portuguese?
Mostly he was more interested in the trade, international trade, because he was very weak. He was not a big samurai, but he was very weak and surrounded by his many enemies. He wanted, for instance, guns, and he wants to get the money. So that is why he became Christian, I think. Yes. And also those Christians, Francisco de Xavier and Saint Thomas, who succeeded him, they are top class missionaries. They devoted not only missionary work but for the medical work, and helped many poor people in those times. So they did. Sumitada Omura was kind of respected those missionaries.
And where was the poverty at that time? Where was the poverty?
Poverty? Yes.
Where?
Poverty is where? Almost all Japan. Many people are in poverty because it is 100 years long war continued, in Japan for between 14th century and 15th century, 16th centuries. 100 years of, not 30 years war, but 100 years of wartime. So
Civil War.
I should say civil war. So during the wartime, that the farmers especially, they are robbed their products, and they couldn't get any money.
They robbed, yeah. So the desperation of the country's civil war state was leading to these social problems such as theft at the time,
yes.
and then other problems ensued from there. And at the same time, there was this international struggle with Portugal. The added international pressure, bringing religion with it. But there is a ban on Christianity which took place by 1612.
Right.
What do we know about that?
Before that, in 1580, Nagasaki city was donated to Jesuit Rome. So Nagasaki became a Roman city, so to speak.
Wow.
But after that, the Lord who ended 100 years civil war, Hideyoshi, came to know that, because he thought he unified whole Japan, and he found out Nagasaki is part of Rome.
Wow.
He became very, very angry.
Wow.
So all the missionaries was expelled.
Yes.
And
by the Romans.
Expelled by the Hideyoshi.
By Hideyoshi.
Hideyoshi.
Right.
And 26 Christians were crucified.
Yes.
On Nishizaka Hill, which we call 26 martyrs.
Wow.
So called, and they became saint.
Wow.
That happened in 1597.
1597.
But even after that,
yes,
there are many people who needed Christianity.
Yep.
Especially poor people.
Yes.
And
for hope.
For hope. So the government finally decided to ban the Christianity totally, because the equality, human are made equal. That idea or the philosophy does not go with that government policy. Those days, very feudalistic.
Yes. Now, Mr. Kinoshita mentions that the 26 Christians that were crucified and those figures became saints. Now, they were crucified at a place called Nishizaka Hill.
Nishizaka Hill.
And which was colonized by 1862. So we're going ahead in time there, but we'll come back to the future shortly. So at the moment we're talking about the 1612 ban on Christianity. This brings us up to the proof of non-Christians. Now, was there some kind of punishment if at that point you were found to be a Christian? One
of the things that they find out, the Christians, hidden Christians, so to speak, that they forced the Christians to put on the figure of Maria or Jesus.
Yes.
There's some plate made, and it happened every year on the New Year's days. They are called to the government house in respective towns, and they are called, each one of them, and they have to put their feet on the plate. And this is described in the novel of and later became a film called Silence. If you know.
Yeah.
So that